COD Zombies may contain some of the greatest Easter eggs of all time, but it's also full of secrets that are just kinda pointless, like using this code in Alpha Omega. But before we get to that, have you ever noticed how in Tag to Toten, although your main problem is of course the zombies, there's actually something way more evil lurking nearby and you may not have even realised? With the map famously being based on Call of the Dead, a lot of the experience looks pretty similar, apart from of course the brand new lab area at the top of the zipline. And it's actually this part of Tag that is hiding something that will probably make you go, huh, kinda pointless I guess. Because if you take a closer look around, you can see a set of large red pipes. I mean, nothing that weird, right? That is until you really pay attention and notice that these are designed to look exactly like the devil. Look, there's even a giant set of horns, and quite clearly the devs created it to look like this on purpose, as Stallinger even has a quote about it.
What is up with those red pipes? Were they trying to make it look like a demon's face?
An extremely cool bit of design work from Treyarch, but maybe not as weird as something that can be found in the Zombies Chronicles version of Origins. There's definitely a portion of the community that prefer the original version of this map, but this detail can't actually be found in Black Ops 2 as you can't grab hold of alternate ammo types from the Pack-a-Punch machine. Because if you repack your gun until you manage to get the turned ability, you can discover something utterly useless. Using your weapon specifically on Templar zombies can obviously get one of them to come over to your team. The only problem here, there is just no point, as they can't even take normal zombies out. Although they have the ability to eliminate other Templar zombies, the standard undead, not so much. They just follow them around looking like an absolute clown. I'm guessing maybe Treyarch didn't test this properly. Something that is actually really impressive though appears in Gorod Krovi. The only problem is 90% of the time you're never even there to see it happen. Okay, so sure, dragons breathing fire in this version of Stalingrad is nothing new to anybody, but there is one specific part of the map where it's way more important than anywhere else. As the first time this winged beast lands on top of the department store, it will actually cause some serious property damage. It completely wipes out one of the huge letters that sits atop the building and it falls down onto the map near Juggernog. Now you might think this is just an asset that spawns in for this cool set piece, but it's not. It's the actual letter that can be seen on top of the department store when you spawn in. Now, why exactly is this pointless if it looks so cool? Because it's not as if the game waits for you to be in this area for the first time in order to see the awesome sequence. This is automatically what happens as soon as the dragon first lands in this specific area, so unless you happen to be running through here at the exact right time, you'd never even get to witness this. A whole incredible looking set piece added into the map, all for most players to have never even realised it existed. But years earlier in Black Ops 2, the fan favourite Mob of the Dead has a feature that is honestly so strange that you'll genuinely wonder why the devs ever included it. Afterlife is pretty important in this map, right? I mean, it's one of the most unique things about the experience. Being able to revive yourself in ghost form was pretty crazy. If you were rushing to get yourself up off the ground though, you may not have noticed how Treyarch decided to do something very strange with your perks. Because no matter what order you decided to buy them in, once you use Afterlife mode, all of that will be changed, as the game randomly decides to rearrange the perks into alphabetical order. Don't get me wrong, it's probably quite good for you if you're perhaps a little bit OCD, but outside of that, I'm not really sure why it's here. COD Zombies is of course full of wonder weapons, every single map has them. But Call of the Dead has one that was sadly never seen again, and that was the scavenger. If you spent your time blowing up the undead with this thing though instead of researching the game's lore, you may never have discovered this weapon's best secret. Because players who put the effort in to investigate every aspect of the game found out that the creator of the scavenger was a Group 935 member known as Harvey Yeena. A strange name, right? And when you look closer, you'll realise you can shorten it to H-Yeena, you know, like hyena. And of course, that is the Pack-a-Punch name of the weapon. But what exactly is a hyena in the animal kingdom? It is a scavenger. It all goes full circle. And makes you realise how cool Treyarch's attention to detail is. The only problem, you'd never even know this if you didn't delve into the extra lore. But what about an Easter egg reward that honestly feels like it was totally pointless? 9 is an incredible map, even the Black Ops 4 haters would probably agree on that fact. And with it being based on a gladiatorial coliseum, it makes total sense that with this detail you would have to defend the podium in order to uncover its secrets. And if you dared to take a stand there for 5 rounds and wipe out all the zombies that came your way, you'll be rewarded with some music. A great little secret, right? Well, I mean, yeah, kind of, but the only problem here is we literally heard this music like 5 minutes before, right here. So Treyarch decided to hide a music Easter egg in the map and just use part of the same song that you hear every single time you load into the experience. I'm sorry, but how useless is that? I think we can forgive them though, as let's be honest, that Avenged Sevenfold track you can unlock in the map is a banger. But interestingly, it's got absolutely nothing on the most pointless character quote ever added into our beloved mode. Infinite Warfare Zombies may be a big fan favourite nowadays, but let's be honest, if you were around when it released, you'll remember that that definitely wasn't the case at the time. It was disliked for a variety of different reasons, with a big one being the Beast from Beyond. But even in the much better maps, fans discovered something so cringe that it really made them ask, why would you even add this? So, do you remember this famous little quote?
Catch me outside, how about that?
Kinda painful to hear this so many years later, right? Well, if you're a big IW fan, you might sadly have to listen to this way more often than you'd like.
Catch me outside, how about that?
The devs at Infinity Ward may have brought some great stuff to the table with their version of Zombies, but this definitely wasn't one of them. You may not even believe it, but in World at War there's a way to skyrocket your profits from wiping out the undead. Unfortunately, you'll probably never get to experience it because it's nearly impossible. Every player loves the arrival of a double point, as obviously it allows you to rack up some major profits, get the map open and buy a ton of stuff like perks and weapons. But it's actually possible to take this to the next level in World at War by grabbing what we'll just call a double point. If you manage to get lucky enough to be rewarded with 2 of these very drops at the exact same time, every single zombie you wipe out, you'll end up with quadruple the amount of points you normally would for an elimination. The devs decided this was way too useful though, and made sure it didn't exist in later games, not allowing you to stack them anymore. Also, I'm gonna be honest, it's so difficult to actually get 2 double point drops at the same time, it unfortunately makes the feature pretty pointless anyway. Shadows of Evil may be an amazing map, but it still contains some very weird secrets. Like how you can earn the ability to take zombies out using donuts. Yep, if you grab hold of the trip mines and plant one in front of 3 different cream cake stands and cause it to take out one of the undead, then from that point onwards, all of your mines will look like donuts because reasons. But I think the crazier point here is, who in their right mind is actually going to spend their time using trip mines? Some things in COD Zombies though just make absolutely no sense, and they exist everywhere, even in maps that many fans consider to be a bit more controversial than Shadows of Evil. So, anytime Alcatraz has appeared as a map location, it seems fair to say that one of the major themes is ghosts. It was the case with the original Mob of the Dead, and also of course with the Black Ops 4 remake Blood of the Dead. So ghosts are spirits, right? You know, like ethereal beings. So can anyone explain to me why in Black Ops 4, when 2 of these things drop the pack-a-punch on the prison roof, if you shoot them, they start bleeding? They've got no organs, no skin, and no veins, so how exactly is this possible? I appreciate that the map is called Blood of the Dead, but this just doesn't make sense to me. And neither does Treyarch's complete lack of continuity when it comes to Alcatraz Island. When you first drop into Blood of the Dead and arrive in Richtofen's lab, one of the coolest things is obviously the fact that the Victor's crew is currently on ice, just chilling, shall we say, in cryopods. And if you look closer, you can see that in order from left to right, they go Stallinger, Russman, Misty, and Malton. So I suppose the real question is, why when fans got their hands on DLC 4 tagged a toten was this completely different? Sure, in the opening cutscene, Stallinger and Russman are still in the same pods, but Misty and Malton have just randomly swapped in the order. Did they get out at some point and just have a chat and then trade places, or is it just much more likely that it was a total Treyarch screw up? Over in Voyage of Despair though, there's an Easter egg that really leaves you wishing that the result was something way cooler, because it's just kinda pointless. Anyone who's explored the Titanic as part of Black Ops 4 will probably know that it has some really cool side Easter eggs, but sadly they're not all like that. Because if you spent the time to hunt down some specific items, namely a trident, a crown and a moustache that need to be placed on a zombie, you may be expecting to be rewarded with something awesome. That is until you find the undead floating around the map, yet all of that just to take on some anti-gravity zombies. Not exactly worth all of that effort, particularly when the same map is throwing kraken tentacles at you and other amazing rewards. Some things like that you just really can't explain, others though make perfect sense. If you were to ask COD Zombies fans what the best maps of all time are, you'd probably hear things like Shadows of Evil, Origins, and of course Der Eisendrache, and I think we can all agree that that last one has a pretty striking name. So why is it then that when you explore the map and discover a poster, it doesn't even spell the name of the experience correctly? You're probably thinking, Der Eisendrache? Did the devs not even know the name of their own map? Well, actually you'd be wrong. As it turns out, this was the original name of the map, right until the reveal when knowledgeable players pointed out that the translation for the Iron Dragon was actually wrong and it had to be changed at the last minute. Sadly though, there was no time for the on-map poster to be swapped out, and so still to this day, Treyarch's mistake is on full show for everyone. Not everything is as serious as this though, because some details added by Treyarch may be pretty pointless, but they're also hilarious. One of the most unique bosses of all time has got to be George Romero on Call of the Dead. Even outside of the fact that he's an absolute icon, having him constantly stalk around the map after you with his giant movie lighting rig was a very cool visual. And it's not the only one with George, because if you manage to lead him up onto the ship and use the flinger at the right time, it's not only you that will be launched across the map.
Holy
The sight of the literal creator of zombies flying through the air might be a bit of a pointless addition in some people's eyes, but man is it funny. Some details in COD Zombies may be a little bit useless, but they can still be so cool. Like how in Ascension, the staff at the Cosmodrome seem to have taken some of their skills with them into the afterlife. You might have noticed that it can sometimes be awkward to hit zombies in this map, and that's because it is, but only certain ones. If you look closely, you'll realise that occasionally some of the undead duck out of the way of your bullets or move at the last second hoping to make you miss. But it's never the scientists that do this, it's always the trained Spetsnaz soldiers in uniform. So even after these guys are no longer alive, they're still holding on to some of the tactics they learnt before they were sent to the grave. Treyarch absolutely did not need to add this detail, but I'm so glad they did. Not everything is as subtle as this though, because some things are just staring you straight in the face, as we need to talk about gobblegums. Although players would probably prefer never to have to pay for these things, surely they're not pointless, right? I mean, they can be incredibly useful if you use them in the correct situations, but one part of them though really does seem totally unnecessary, and that is the colour code system. You may never have even realised, but in Black Ops 3 these consumables are actually split into 4 different colours based on what they do. Every single purple gum is that colour because these are the consumables you activate manually. Orange means that it's automatically used instantly when you get it out the machine. Blue are round based, i.e. they last for a certain number of rounds before running out, and green are time based that last for a specific time period. But why did Treyarch even bother with this? Every single gobblegum already tells you exactly what it does, both in the menu and in game. And no one is getting confused with their consumables and then suddenly remembering exactly how it works again, all because of the fact that it happens to be green or blue. It really does just feel like the most pointless colour code system, so much so that a ton of fans didn't even realise it existed. Just like the fact that you can secretly make yourself better at swimming in Zetsubou no Shima, but is there really any point? This was of course the first map added into Zombies that required you to go underwater, and it was kind of weird with you being able to stop yourself drowning by consuming air from orange spores, you know, as you do. But it wasn't the only way you'd be able to stay underwater for longer without drowning, because getting hold of the gas mask would actually give you this ability. It might just be me, but I'm not really understanding that one. How exactly does a gas mask stop you from drowning? A mask designed to stop gas is somehow usable underwater in COD Zombies. And not only that, but what is the point? You spend next to no time swimming in Zetsubou no Shima anyway, so it's not as if this advantage is even worthwhile. But I suppose if you're getting the gas mask for its other benefits, then at least it's no extra effort. It turns out though that being able to hold your breath can be extended even further when you buy Jug. Everyone obviously does this anyway, as they 100% need the perk, but probably never realised about this added benefit because, as I've mentioned, no one spends any time in the water anyway. More oxygen for those lungs of yours for all the time that you're not going to be spending underwater. And incredibly, it can be improved a 3rd time by purchasing Stamina Up, extending your breath holding abilities even further. At least this one makes sense though. The perk that gives you more stamina allows you to swim underwater for longer, of course. But even so, why? You don't actually need it, and it's so not noticeable that most players don't even realise it's a thing in the first place. Totally pointless. But there's actually something on Moon that looks totally pointless, but it turns out though it's really not. Let's be real, there are very few things in that map more useful than the hacker. It has so many amazing uses and could be one of the most unique items ever. But there's one thing it can do that at first seems totally useless. If you hack a wall by, not only will it randomly turn it upside down, it will make the cost of buying ammo for it go way up. Yeah, definitely seems like something you obviously don't want to do, right? And at that point it is. Well, that is until you pack-a-punch the weapon anyway. Because once you've done this, it will massively reduce the price of ammo for the weapon, meaning getting to high rounds with it will be way cheaper. So definitely pointless in the short term, but in the long term, not so much. If you're a fan of Origins though, you might have noticed something in the intro cutscene that just should not be there. As we all know, our premise crew can be seen arriving in France and taking out the undead horde in big numbers. And at one point, Nikolai can be seen dropping some zombies using the well-known Olympia shotgun. But its inclusion here is just wrong, as the Olympia isn't even in Origins. In fact, Origins was actually the first map since Kino not to include this very shotgun. Surely this had to be Treyarch rubbing people's noses in it who chose to side with the Olympia in the classic debate against the M14. There's a chance though that you may not have realised that hellhounds in World at War are actually hiding an interesting detail that only shows up if you attack them from a certain position. 99% of the time you probably wouldn't even see this, as when they attack, a smart player is either going to be running or standing their ground on their feet, so it will always look like this. But if you for some very weird reason decide to prone when the hellhounds come looking for you, they'll actually have a completely different attack animation. Why this was added, I'm honestly not sure, but it's a cool detail nonetheless. Something else you'd probably never realise can be found in a ton of different zombies experiences if you decide not to do what pretty much every player does as soon as they spawn into a map. Although not every single person would necessarily buy Quick Revive immediately, tons of fans definitely do, and so because of that it probably wouldn't click to them that they just secretly activated the arrival of a particular power up, and that is the death machine. Because as soon as players get hold of Quick Revive, that then means that they have a chance to get this famous minigun drop, but before this point not so much, as without buying Quick Revive it will never happen. That is unless you explore the map and end up turning the power on, as that is the only other thing that will cause the death machine drop to be added to the collection of power-ups. If you don't do either of these things, then you will literally never see one, unless you're using consumables obviously. One thing death machines can be pretty good for is wiping out the astronaut on Moon, but you definitely can't say the same for one of the most powerful wonder weapons in COD Zombies history. Because, believe it or not, you could spend an absolute fortune spinning the mystery box in order to get the wave gun, as it would be your best chance at wiping out zombies. But it would be totally pointless if you're specifically getting hold of it to take out the astronaut, because it's absolutely useless against him. It does nothing, which is actually a pretty interesting mechanic added by the devs, meaning you can't just rely on this weapon. And it's not the only OP item that the astronaut just laughs at, because it's not even affected, as this pretty crazy phenomenon also applied to the much loved Gersh devices. They may be extremely effective at taking down the undead by sucking them away into oblivion, but the Moon Man is not going to go down like that. He just decides, nah, I don't think so, and carries on marching towards you like an absolute boss as if it's nothing. A smart move from Treyarch to also make these things totally pointless when taking on the astronaut, so the players actually have to think outside the box. And sticking with the guy in the spacesuit, the devs decided to include a pretty interesting detail for people who only really played solo. Because when you're getting followed by that dude, the red name above his head becomes pretty obvious. And it turns out that specifically when playing on your own, the names that you'll see here are all developers working at Treyarch at the time. If you jump into a co-op game though, the names will instead be people from your own friends list. Another thing that didn't necessarily need to be included, but a great Easter egg. And to be fair, neither did this incredible detail in Revelations. I totally understand that this map had a lot of problems and things that could have been done way better, but it wasn't all bad because Treyarch included tons of awesome things that they didn't even really need to. Like how you'll get a completely different game over music depending on where you die in the map, acting as an awesome callback to maps of the past. Like how dying in the Verrucht area will sound like this. Of course, referencing exactly what you'd hear when you originally met your doom way back in World at War. And it's not the only part of Revelations that will do this, because although the Origins area of the map may be a bit underwhelming compared to the full Zombies Chronicles remake, it does also have its own unique death music. And of course, this is taken directly from the first ever map that the premise characters appeared in. Did you know though that back in the OG days there was actually a perk in COD Zombies that totally changed price based on what platform you're playing on? Everyone remembers perks being the exact same no matter how you're playing the game. Jug is jug no matter what, right? And a lot of maps it's found in the same place, cost the same price, and it gives you extra health. And if you think this, you'd be right, but the same cannot be said about Deadshot daiquiri. Because if you've ever played Black Ops 1 on both PC and console, you may have noticed that this well-known perk is not the same price on both. Being buyable for 1500 on console but 500 points cheaper at 1000 on PC, so what's that all about? It's pretty simple really. Treyarch decided to discount Deadshot daiquiri on PC because there is no controller aim assist, meaning the perk is just sadly not as useful. So essentially they thought it would be a rip-off to charge players the same amount for it on PC when it simply wasn't as good. I mean, that was kind of them, I guess. But something that definitely wasn't was randomly extending the Reckoning directed mode quest in Black Ops 6 Zombies for absolutely no reason. So the whole point of adding directed mode into the game was to make Easter egg quests easier for casual players by capping the rounds at 15 and detailing steps to make them way less complicated. So is anybody able to tell me why Treyarch weirdly decided to add a step that isn't even part of the normal version of the quest? Strangely, the devs forced less skilled players to upgrade the Gorg Effects Wonder Weapon to either the C or N variant, which normally wouldn't seem that odd as this kind of thing happens in main quests all the time. But anyone who's finished Reckoning's Easter egg would be able to tell that you literally don't need to do this in the normal version. This had to be a total screw up. One thing that's really entertaining to see in that map though is zombies meeting their demise without you even needing to use a gun, and no, I'm not talking about traps. Because all it takes is for you to use the anti-grav launchers to get from one tower to another, and you can literally watch the undead splat into the wall next to you if you time your jumps right. I can't believe they don't give you points for it though, what a scam. But if we're talking about amusing things happening to the zombies, we've definitely got to talk about Alpha Omega. It's no secret that this map was sadly pretty hated by the vast majority of the community, but the one thing that nearly everyone could agree on was that Rushmore was very entertaining. Not only did he bring the map to life, but he also had tons of amazing abilities depending on what code you decided to enter, from freezing all the zombies for 30 seconds to spawning in various useful power-ups. But it doesn't mean that every single one of them are, because some are just plain pointless. Like how if you enter 7853, you'll get what is, shall we just say, a pretty interesting result. Yep, you've literally gone out of your way to force the zombies to start barfing, and you've really just got to think why. But perhaps even weirder than that is something so pointless it's honestly baffling Treyarch even included it. If you decided to input 9277 into Rushmore instead, you'll be teleported to a random location on the map. Like what? Alpha Omega is already not a very big experience at all, so why would you need to teleport anywhere really? And also, to do this, you've got to make your way over to Rushmore specifically to then be teleported somewhere else. It honestly makes absolutely zero sense. It's not even as if you could quickly do this to save you from the zombies, as it takes ages to input the damn code anyway. But did you know that COD Zombies' original wonder weapon was actually changed for no reason, and we never got an explanation? So the ray gun famously looks like this, right? Largely a kind of metallic red colour with a blue glowing barrel. I mean, yeah, sure, for 99% of Zombies maps it definitely does, but there's actually two where it doesn't. Back in Black Ops 2, fans dropped into Buried and randomly discovered that when they got the ray gun out of the mystery box, the barrel had been changed from blue to green. And it wasn't the only experience where this happened, as the colour switch stuck around for the final DLC of the game Origins as well. It appeared in only 2 maps, and once Black Ops 3 arrived, it was back to blue again. No details, no lore, no explanation, blue to green and then back to blue again. It was so odd. I'm not gonna lie though, I think I actually prefer the green version. Something that definitely should have been changed though is Electric Cherry. Introduced of course in Black Ops 2, it was a very useful perk and was famously featured on the incredible Mob of the Dead, but it's not all good here. Because in a pretty baffling move on Treyarch's part, they just didn't give Electric Cherry a perk jingle. There was some fairly simple music, but an official jingle was nowhere to be found in the game. And that was the only time they ever made this mistake, and no, whatever those things are in BO4 do not count. Thank God, as it's practically illegal for a perk machine not to have a jingle. Some things though in COD Zombies there is just honestly no point doing, but it's still cool that they exist, I guess. Like how in Forsaken you can give yourself the dumbest possible down of all time if you're feeling a bit crazy. When you're trying to get hold of the Chrysalax, one of the steps involves a large glowing rock that comes flying down onto the map from the huge portal in the sky. Unfortunately for anyone who has a bit of a death wish, it always lands in the same place, just up the street from the Tombstone soda machine. Because if you really cannot stand another minute inside Forsaken, it's actually possible to get wiped out by this thing. You just gotta be in the right place at the the wrong place at the wrong time, and boom, death by meteorite. Probably one of the more unique deaths in the game. It kinda makes sense though having a huge rock land on your head, but something that really doesn't follow any logic is how monkey bombs work against certain enemies. We all know they're useful, they always have been ever since they were introduced, distracting zombies, allowing you to make a quick getaway from a tight spot. But this is not the case with every single enemy, because throwing down one of these on a hellhound round is utterly pointless. They completely ignore the monkey bomb and just continue to chase the player instead. And out of all the things in COD Zombies that you would think would want to chase after a toy, it would have to be a dog, even if these are zombie pups. But it's not the only thing in World at War that just does not work properly. You just maybe didn't even realise it because you probably never pick up the Molotovs in Nakta and Toten, as they are terrible. Even in the first ever Zombies experience, tons of the most famous power-ups already existed, like max ammos, and if you were using something like the ray gun, then they were incredibly valuable as they were the only way to keep its ammo topped up. But for some reason they just didn't work with things like Molotovs, completely refusing to fill them up again. Truthfully, it didn't really matter though, as no one is using those things to survive in Nact anyway. Something that is definitely not useless is the lightning staff in Origins, and famously in order to get hold of this thing you've got to jump aboard the tank and ride it round the trenches in order to grab all of the parts you need. And most likely once you've done this, you'll never end up going back to these places, as it's kinda pointless, right? Well, not entirely. Because if you do decide to return to the areas where you collected the staff pieces previously, they can actually be replaced by various power-ups instead. Not exactly mind-blowing, as these will drop fairly constantly in the map anyway, but if you're looking to grab an easy one, there you go. Speaking of getting hold of things easily though, we've got to talk a little bit about a throwback map, and that is Town. When Transit originally released, it was of course hugely unpopular, meaning that tons of fans just gave up on it and spent most of their time doing classic survival rounds in Town instead. It really had everything that you needed for a simple zombies map, perks, a mystery box, and Pack-a-Punch was right there in the middle. You may not have known though, but for some reason after you'd stuck your weapon in this thing for an upgrade, you can strangely grab it again afterwards through the back of the machine. Could be useful I guess, but also kinda pointless, as Pack-a-Punching on Town was already as simple as it could possibly be, apart from the lava I suppose. Everyone knows about the monkeys on Ascension, right? Even if you didn't play COD Zombies back in the day, you've no doubt jumped into a game of Black Ops 1 or Zombies Chronicles and taken on the undead in the Cosmodrome. But it's well known in that map that the horde of corpses is not the most awkward thing to deal with. It's these annoying little creatures constantly trying to steal your perks from you. Well, there's actually a surefire way to stop them ever spawning into the map in the first place. Just don't buy any perks. If you never spend your points on these things, then they won't even land in the map because they'll have no machines to target from you not using them in the first place. The huge downside, you have to survive at Ascension without any perks whatsoever. Realistically, it's just a lose-lose scenario. But something that serves pretty much no purpose can be found in Revelations, and let's just call it the most pointless hat of all time. Although there are tons of these things you can get hold of in DLC 4 of Black Ops 3, most of them are really useful, giving you an even better chance of surviving against the undead. But one can be found in the Mob of the Dead section of the map that just does nothing. Fans of the game at the time may well remember that in the prison cell you can grab Al's hat, which obviously belonged to Al Arlington from Mob of the Dead. And sure, it might be cool for other players as they get to see you wearing this thing, but for the person who gets hold of it, it doesn't even do anything. At the time of release, tons of fans were convinced that it was related to an Easter egg, but it turned out not to be true and was instead nothing more than a little cosmetic detail. In the same game, in the much more popular Der Eisendrache, there's a hidden feature that most fans would never even bother to use, but it's still pretty interesting nonetheless. Once you've activated the anti-grav in the undercroft, you can wall run over 6 different symbols around the room, and if done correctly, it will unlock a secret BRM wall buy. The only issue here is that the BRM is very easy to get out of the mystery box, so is this even worth it? I suppose if you're a big fan of this weapon for some reason, it allows you to guarantee getting it instead of spending a fortune on the box. You might not know though that when Black Ops 3 first launched, a famous power-up actually looked very different than it does now. Everyone knows that in Shadows of Evil, when you pick up a max ammo, it of course looks like this, right? Well, originally it didn't. It looked totally different, instead having this extremely unique Cthulhu design that fit very well with the Lovecraftian themes of the Apothicons. The tragedy was that Treyarch never actually paid for the rights to use this artwork in-game, and so very quickly after launch it had to be deleted and replaced with the classic one that is present in all BO3 maps. The modern age of COD Zombies may get a lot of hate for not living up to the true classics like Black Ops 3, but surprisingly there is one thing that BO6 does better than pretty much any other game, and that is dying. Other games got by fine without this feature, so it wasn't really even needed, but damn is it cool. Each mini-boss in the game has its own incredibly well-made death animation, so even when you're absolutely raging about the fact that you've been wiped out, at least you get to be annoyed whilst looking at something extremely impressive. It really feels like so much effort was put into these things. It's just a shame that you can't say the same for everything in Black Ops 6. Like how one part of the Tombs Easter egg is just completely reused content and you may not have even realised. One part of upgrading the eye staff involves shooting rocks in the sky of the Ether Nexus, as well as identifying which symbols they show so you can then input them on this panel that appears on the portal. When you do this, you may stand there thinking these symbols look so familiar, and that's because if you played MWZ then they probably are, as they are taken directly from that game mode and are not unique to BO6 at all. We could sit here and say maybe there's a lore explanation for this, but instead I'm going to take a guess at the fact that the devs didn't want to waste time creating some new ones. If you're a fan of Zombies Chronicles and the classic weapons it brought back to the game, you may have wondered why when you manage to grab the M16 out of the box does it randomly have a playing card attached to it. Well, this is actually the exact artwork for the Joker card that was featured in World at War and could be used in the campaign to give yourself the extra challenge of only being able to play with a knife and rocks. Why it's randomly in Black Ops 3, your guess is as good as mine, but tons of people say that it's because the M16 is an absolute joke in this game. But there's a mistake in Moon that really makes you question why it's never been fixed after all these years. There are a lot of things that are pretty annoying about the Easter egg on that map, and they're mainly focused around the fact that the RNG needed on this experience is just crazy. And a famous part of that is of course needing the excavator to hit Tunnel 6. Anyone who's being smart there will know about the fact that you can hack the excavator panels in the spawn room to stop them working in an area you don't want. The only problem with this is though the labelling makes absolutely no sense. E should obviously stand for Epsilon, right? Well, it doesn't, as E is the Omicron panel. Yeah, I've no idea what Treyarch was thinking here. Luckily though, some Easter eggs make perfect sense even if most people never bother doing them. Believe it or not, but there's actually a way to completely remove zombies from Der Eisendrache. Well, sort of. Because if you get hold of the Wrath of the Ancient's bow and use it to shoot 3 different skulls around the map, which can only be seen when you're using the in plain sight gobblegum, they'll teleport to this chair. And then from that point onwards, you're no longer taking on the zombies, instead you're now taking on the skeletons. It changes pretty much nothing apart from the visuals, but it's still a cool little detail. But if you've ever played Tag the Toten and were lucky enough to get one of its new weapons out of the mystery box or even from a side quest, you may have looked at it and thought, I swear I've seen this before, and that's because you probably have. Samantha Max has finally got her own item in DLC 4 of Black Ops 4 when Treyarch decided to add this music box as a throwable, and let's be honest, it was pretty awesome at taking out the zombies. But if you'd paid attention to other maps throughout the history of the mode, you may have recognised this instantly, as this very music box was featured in Der Eisendrache in one of the bedrooms, and of course you could get it to play a version of the famous lullaby.